What if the defining moment of the Belgian Grand Prix weekend wasn't a podium finish, a daring overtake, or a spectacular win, but a spin? Not just any spin, but one from Lewis Hamilton, seven-time world champion, who found himself facing the wrong way at the bus stop chicane. It wasn't driver error, it wasn't carelessness. It was something far more unsettling, a mechanical or setup failure that exposed the raw nerves behind Ferrari's latest upgrade. As the paddock buzzed with praise for Oscar Piastri's pole lap and McLaren's resurgence, Hamilton sat quietly, stunned. "That's never happened to me before," he said, and from a driver who's competed at the absolute edge of performance for over a decade. That statement should send shockwaves. Ferrari entered the weekend with bold intent. A new rear suspension setup was introduced, a major change designed to offer stability under braking and performance in low-speed corners. But the rollout was anything but smooth. Hamilton's early practice sessions hinted at trouble. He reported instability, unexpected locking, and poor rear grip. And then came sprint qualifying. Under heavy braking into the chicane, the rear end stepped out violently, locked, spun, done. Just like that, his weekend was hanging by a thread. In a session where tire management and precision are everything, where you only get one reel, Chance Hamilton's car betrayed him at the worst possible moment. While some pointed to brake bias or track dust as contributing factors, others weren't so quick to give Ferrari the benefit of the doubt. Anthony Davidson, one of the sharpest minds in post-session analysis, made it clear this wasn't typical driver behavior. The issue may have begun even before Hamilton turned the wheel, possibly a premature lockup at the rear axle, long before apex. Engineers can sugarcoat it, suggest the data is heading in the right direction, but this was a failure in execution, not expectation. And when the upgrade that's meant to stabilize you sends your car into a spin, confidence takes a hit both in the garage and behind the wheel. And yet, while Ferrari was unraveling, McLaren was building something extraordinary. Piastri's pole lap wasn't just fast, it was a declaration. The McLaren didn't just outperform Red Bull and Mercedes, it humiliated them. In a year where parity should be closing the gap, McLaren looked invincible. They weren't just fast on softs, they were fast on mediums. High-speed corners, low-speed traction, straight-line balance, no weakness. Hamilton's spin was dramatic, but Piastri's lap was history, and not just figuratively. He obliterated Hamilton's 2020 Spa record in the W11, a lap many considered unbeatable. The torch is being passed. And for some, not willingly. To understand just how seismic Oscar Piastri's lap was, you need context. Hamilton's 2020 Spa pole lap came in the W11, arguably the fastest F1 car ever created. Back then, it was perfection, flat through Puhan, flawless braking, power delivery that didn't end. That time stood as a symbol of mechanical supremacy. But in 2024, on a resurfaced track with evolving regulations, Piastri tore that benchmark down. Not with luck, not with rain. With raw talent and a car that has didn't become the most complete machine on the grid, the MCL60 was once a midfield runner, battling for scraps. But what Andrea Stella and the McLaren team have engineered is no less than a revolution. The 2024 MCL39 fast everywhere, stable under braking, lethal in traffic is rewriting what's possible with the current regulations. It was dominant on every compound. From heavy fuel runs to final lap sprints, McLaren found performance others couldn't touch. And crucially, it didn't come at the expense of driver comfort. Unlike Red Bull's low downforce gamble or Ferrari's unpredictable rear, McLaren's setup offered total trust. It's the kind of car that lets a young driver like Piastri push past the limit and still come out smiling. In the lap itself, watch it frame by frame. Was it perfect? No. Piastri himself admitted there were corners like turn 14 in Lacombe where time was left on the table. Maybe a tenth and a half? Maybe more. But that's what makes it even more impressive. He didn't need a flawless lap to break records. And when you can beat Max Verstappen and Lando Norris by 6/10 with time left on the clock, that's not just pace. That's control, that's composure. That's a driver entering the elite. But not everyone had such clarity. Norris, who's generally outpaced Piastri over the season, was left scratching his head, half a second adrift and unsure why. It wasn't set up. It wasn't traffic. It was just performance. And that's the hardest pill to swallow. Because for the first time in months, it's not Lando who's leading McLaren forward, it's Oscar. That kind of internal power shift matters, not just for points, for psychology, for team dynamics, and it could shape the rest of their season. Meanwhile, Red Bull's response was experimental at best. Verstappen ran ultra-low downforce, sacrificing cornering grip for straight-line speed. It worked in Sector 1. It worked in Sector 3. But in Sector 2, where technical control matters most, the McLaren was untouchable. Verstappen's lap was fast, a 1 minute 40 seconds and 9 milliseconds, and still it was nearly a full tenth behind Piastri. And when a car like Red Bull's, driven by a generational talent like Max, is losing ground at Spa, something fundamental has shifted. Back in the Ferrari garage, the post-mortem had already begun. and the mood was anything but optimistic. Hamilton's spin raised urgent questions, not only about the rear suspension upgrade, but about the process that led to its deployment. In Formula One, every mechanical change must be matched by setup precision. And when you bring a new component, especially one as complex as a suspension arm, you don't just drop it in and hope for the best, you simulate it, you tune for it, you adapt the whole car around it. But from the outside, it looked like Ferrari rushed it. During practice, Hamilton was clear. The car was locking up. The rear felt unpredictable. There was instability under braking. These are not small issues. These are red flags. And yet, come sprint qualifying, Ferrari had not corrected them. They gambled on the upgrade and paid the price. Some commentators argue that the suspension itself isn't faulty, just that Ferrari hasn't yet found the right ride height, brake balance, or damper settings to support it. But that explanation doesn't help the driver whose lap and confidence was destroyed. When Hamilton said the rear lockup was a first in his career, it wasn't hyperbole. That's coming from a driver who has tested every kind of braking, system-driven in every condition imaginable, and mastered more F1 hardware than almost anyone alive. And now, at Ferrari, he's spinning into corners in ways he's never experienced before. If that doesn't concern the engineers, it should. Ferrari boss, Fred Vasseur, always quick to deflect from the car, subtly pointed to Hamilton's braking style and even suggested he was distracted by dust on the track. But those kinds of explanations don't hold up against the footage. The onboard shows a clean track, a standard braking point, and a violent rear snap. This wasn't a matter of timing. It was a mechanical failure to control rear axle stability under load. Whether it was brake bias or suspension geometry, the result was the same: a ruined lap and a lost opportunity. Meanwhile, George Russell wasn't spared either. Antonelli's off-track excursion sent gravel flying, compromising Russell's car, and likely damaging his floor or diffuser. His run in SQ2 ended early. Another fast car out, not due to lack of pace, but because of avoidable disruption. In a normal session, there's time to recover. In sprint qualifying, you get one shot, and if you're forced wide or lose balance even once, your weekend's reshaped entirely. This wasn't just a weekend of mechanical failure, it was a weekend of timing failure, setup failure, and a growing sense that Ferrari and Mercedes, despite their resources, are falling behind the curve. The contrast couldn't be sharper. While Ferrari scrambled to find answers and Mercedes coped with damage and chaos, McLaren was executing with military precision. Andrea Stella's calm leadership and surgical attention to detail have turned the team into a real threat not just on paper, but on track. During sprint qualifying, the MCL39 didn't just thrive, it evolved. The track was improving by the second. Temperatures were shifting, grip was changing, yet Piastri delivered every single time he left the garage. He didn't just survive chaos, he capitalized on it. When others were caught out by traffic, tire degradation, or a loss of rhythm, Oscar was already ahead of the curve. His pole lap wasn't luck, it was mastery. That lap, a 1 minute 40 seconds and 5 milliseconds, obliterated expectations. Verstappen, who himself delivered a brilliant lap in the low downforce Red Bull, could only manage a 1 minute 40 seconds and 9 milliseconds. That's no small gap, not in modern Formula One, where qualifying times are often separated by thousands. It's a generational statement. McLaren has a car that can match and beat the might of Red Bull. Even Lando Norris, who many view as the stronger driver at McLaren, couldn't get close. 6/10 behind Piastri and equal machinery. That's the kind of performance that changes careers. But just as impressive as the lap was, the way McLaren read the track in SQ2, the timing of runs became crucial. Drivers who went out late benefited from dramatic track evolution. In the space of a single minute, 5 drivers changed positions. Had Tsunoda or Lawson crossed the line 30 seconds later, Piastri might not have even made it to SQ3. Instead, McLaren played it perfectly. They put Oscar out at the right moment, gave him clear air, and trusted his feel for the car. It paid off, barely, but in a sport of margins, barely is enough. And that's what separates great teams from good ones. Red Bull gambled on straight-line speed. Ferrari gambled on rear suspension. Mercedes got caught in the wake of a rookie's mistake. McLaren, they executed. They knew their car. They knew their driver. And in a qualifying format that punishes hesitation, they were fearless. Piastri survived SQ2 by 10 sand, then went on to crush SQ3 by miles. That is the mentality of a championship team in the making. But what does this mean heading into Sunday? That's where the tension ratchets up even further. Rain is in the forecast. Thunderstorms are possible. And when Spa gets wet, everything resets. Downforce levels change. Tire degradation becomes unpredictable. Race strategy becomes reactive rather than planned. And the car that dominated Saturday might be exposed. But if there's one thing Piastri's performance suggests, it's that this McLaren can handle unpredictability. It thrives in it. The MCL39 isn't just fast, it's adaptable. That's a terrifying combination. For Red Bull, the question now becomes whether their low downforce gamble, which cost them valuable time in the technical middle sector, can stand up in wet conditions. For Ferrari and Hamilton, Sunday might be a chance to reset, to learn from sprint data, adjust the setup, and claw back confidence. But if they get it wrong again, the spiral deepens and the season starts slipping away. As the weekend draws to a close, the headlines write themselves. McLaren dominates. Piastri ascends. Hamilton spins. Ferrari falters. But behind every lap time in team radio is a deeper story, a story about a sport in transition, about generational shifts, about trust in machinery, in data, and in instincts. The narrative at Spa-Francorchamps wasn't just about who topped the charts. It was about who's truly rising and who's being left behind. Hamilton's words linger in the background. It's never happened to me before. That's not frustration. That's disbelief. A man who's defined control, suddenly left powerless by a machine that won't respond. That is the kind of moment that shakes confidence not just in the car, but in the future. Because for all the talk of Ferrari's rebirth, this weekend exposed how fragile their progress still is. Their upgrades might work in theory, but theory doesn't win races. Execution does. Meanwhile, McLaren is becoming the model of execution. They've built a car that's versatile, competitive, and perhaps most importantly, driver-friendly, and that might be their biggest advantage in the title fight to come, because talent without tools is wasted. And for once, McLaren's tools are worthy of the driver's ambitions. Piastri is no longer the promising rookie. He's a contender, a real one, and with more sprint weekends ahead, more points up for grabs, the team has a chance to make a statement that resonates all the way to Abu Dhabi. But it's not just about McLaren. It's about how everyone else responds. Red Bull must decide if their send it and hope philosophy on downforce still works when competitors are gaining ground. Verstappen's performance remains elite, but even he can't overcome physics. Forever, Ferrari must confront their own engineering decisions and admit when they get it wrong. And Mercedes, they must shield Russell from unnecessary setbacks and give Hamilton the platform to fight, not just react. The 2024 season is shaping up to be more than a race for wins. It's a race for identity. For who defines this new era of F1? Is it Red Bull's ruthless dominance? Is it McLaren's return to glory? Or is it Ferrari and Mercedes trying to rediscover what once made them great? Spa gave us a glimpse. The rest of the calendar will give us the answer. And as the lights go out for Sunday's race, remember this. One spin can tell 1,000 stories. One pole lap can redefine a career. And in a sport measured in milliseconds, the margins between legacy and loss have never felt thinner. If you're new here, subscribe. If you've followed this story, comment your thoughts below. And if you're watching closely, you already know. This season is far from over.